Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Well, good morning. Good morning. We're going to have a little bit different session today, a little bit different type of conversation than we've had in the past. Normally, we start our conversations at 10 o'clock and we continue those conversations for an hour. Today's conversation is going to be with Oklahoma Senate Minority Leader Kay Floyd. Kay Floyd is just an outstanding leader in the state of Oklahoma. When it comes to the Democrats, she is a warrior. She's a fighter. She gets into the trenches and really fights tooth and toenail with every single Republican. And she also looks for consensus, things that are consensus builders. She looks for things that, you know, are wins for Democrats, even within a very heavy Republican majority, a supermajority that we have in the legislature here in Oklahoma. So that's the conversation we're going to have. The catch is that that conversation is not going to begin until approximately 30 minutes from now. She is not going to be able to join us until 10:30, which gives us an opportunity between now and 10:30 to just have conversations with each other about current events, about topics that are going on within the different chapters of Coffee with Democrats, the different members. So we're going to be opening up the floor to having more than just our normal conversation for the foreseeable future until such time as Leader Floyd can join, and then we'll be able to shut down that part of the conversation and pivot directly over to the conversation that we're going to have with Leader Floyd. So we've got on here this morning, we've got Georgia. Is this Lynn? All right. We're still trying to get everything connected here, so bear with us just a little bit as we get everybody connected and on here. So
let me see. Yeah, this is Len. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Tell us a little bit about Georgia today.
Georgia. What's the song say? Georgia on my mind?
Yes, and you know, that's a beautiful song, by the way.
But really, it's been relatively quiet right now. There's been some consternation by Georgia Department of Transportation because the Republicans passed a bill that Governor Kent signed, raising the bridge limit on some 700 bridges. So the Department of Transportation now has to go and test all those bridges to see if they can handle those limits.
Right.
Which is taking it up over 10% from what they currently are. And it's basically, they sold it as a bill to help agricultural and logging companies that aren't along in the interstate. So,
well,
it's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. You know, normally bridges are built, they're overbuilt. They're built to exceed the capacity of what they're estimating that they'll be able to handle. But at the same time, you got to be very cautious about them because the infrastructure, as you know, we've gone through an extensive infrastructure bill, and we're going to be changing out hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of bridges across the United States with this infrastructure bill, because the deteriorating condition of our bridges that were built back in the 1950s, basically after World War II, they're, you know, 80 years old. They're needing to be replaced. So it's 70 to 80 years old. It's time for those to be replaced and upgraded. I mean, you just go out into rural America and you just see some of the bridges that we go across, and it just you don't. Let's put it this way: every time I go underneath of a bridge and I look up at the bridge structure itself, I don't want to be under the bridge anymore, because you're seeing lots of rust, lots of chipping and stuff that's going on in the concrete. It's delaminating. The conditions of a lot of bridges are not going to handle the increased weight.
No, that was the issue that they had with one bridge in particular when I was living in Kentucky, between the bridge that went over the Ohio River between Cincinnati and Kentucky. And finally they are replacing that bridge, but literally chunks of concrete at times were falling on cars because it was an over-under bridge. So you take your life sometimes in your own hands when you're doing that, driving on some of those bridges. So, but other than that, things are going well. I'm glad to see that the Democrats have much more compassion for Mitch McConnell than any Republican has shown for any of our political leaders, such as Nancy Pelosi's husband.
Or Fetterman.
Right, yeah, or John Fetterman when he had his stroke. So apparently that's almost looked like that's what former leader of the Senate had. It's like a little mini stroke there or something.
Yeah, apparently he had a fall about 3 months ago that was quite extensive, and he had to go into rehabilitation. And I'm curious. Again, I don't wish him any ill. Mitch McConnell has not been a friend to Democrats. Let's point blank say that up front. But he's a human being, and as such, I was concerned when I heard that he went into the hospital and was in recovery from a fall, from apparently hitting his head back then. And maybe this is something as a result of that. They keep everything quiet. It's kind of like a NFL team. They don't want anybody to know what's going on with the injuries and with the conditions of their players. And the GOP is kind of handling it the same way. They don't want to divulge anything that would give the possibility of, or the vision that something is wrong.
Well,
but I was worried that maybe he was going to start having seizures, and
they don't want him stepping down, given that it's now for first time in years that there's a Democratic governor in Kentucky that would appoint his replacement for the rest of his term if something did happen to him. So it's interesting, and he's definitely not been a friend of the Democrats at all. But don't wish anybody ill will. We're hopefully above that board.
Exactly right. Exactly. We're still moving along here in Oklahoma. There's an Oklahoma education meeting today. They are currently in violation of Oklahoma Open Meetings Act. They are holding it in a small conference room, and they've got a very large crowd, and this small conference room is not going to accommodate it. So they're telling people they're having to stay out. And according to the Open Meetings Act, if enough people show up, they're going to have to open the meeting, call a recess, and move the meeting to another facility that can hold the public. And apparently they're not doing that here in Oklahoma, and that's going to become a problem. Most of our Democrat legislators are keying in on that it's a problem, and they're calling it a violation of the Oklahoma Open Meetings Act, so that it should be moved immediately to another location. So we're getting ready to go live on Facebook and YouTube. So let me get back over here to go live, and we will.
I've got to step out just for a second, but I'll leave, stay in the group, and I'll just mute my microphone.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And there we go. We've got Coffee with Democrats is now live on our Coffee with Democrats Facebook page, and also on our Coffee with Democrats YouTube live. So welcome to anybody who's listening on Coffee with Democrats Facebook or Coffee with Democrats YouTube. As I said earlier, today's going to be a little bit different kind of conversation. We aren't going to have the Senate Minority Leader Kay Floyd here until about 10:30. So until then, we're going to be just having some open discussion and just going over some current events that we're reading on our news feed. So just bear with us as we go through that. We are waiting for a few other people to join in with Coffee with Democrats. One of our members, Calais, she is taking a respite, which is just the most amazing thing. She's going on a big tour with her family, going to Texas and then to California, and we wish her nothing but safe and enjoyable travels while she's gone. And we look forward to her being able to come back in 2 weeks and rejoining us. She deserves it. She is one of the hardest workers for democracy that we've encountered. She's out of Arkansas, and she's working on campaigns throughout the United States. She is just a tremendous individual, and we wish her nothing but the most success and the safest travels. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today was, everybody keeps talking about, and particularly on the Republican side of the world, they continue want to talk about the recession and how Americans are hurting because of Biden policy. Well, the fact is, and the report today from the Washington Post is, the U.S. economy grew by an annual rate of 2.4% in the second quarter. This exceeds what anybody had expected, even though we have a worldwide recession that was brought about by the Russian invasion of Ukraine over a year ago, and has hampered supply chains ever since. And it's caused a worldwide recession. But here again, Bidenomics, as we like to call it on the Democrat side, has really helped helped the United States through the Democrat policies. As we've all seen, the most fiscally responsible political group has always been the Democrats. There's always been a discussion about taxing and spending and an accusation of that, when in fact, the only reason that's brought up, tax and spend, is to try to shade corporate America and continue and perpetuate corporate greed in this Reaganomic policy of top-down economics, so that you allow less taxes on the top earners, and so that they'll pass on their success to the rest of the economy. And that's never worked. Has never worked. Every single time that they are in power and they try to enact that old Reaganomics top down, it's always failed, and it's failed miserably. The worst that we've ever experienced was at the end of Bush's term, and that was by natural cause. And what exceeded that was the Trump implosion of the economy because of his complete and absolute failure to handle COVID, and completely shut down the economy in the United States, again, just because of his failure to be able to manage one of the simplest and easiest things to do out there. if he would have followed some of the advice, the whole possibility of what we went through, it was not going to stop COVID from spreading, but it would have mitigated it significantly. The loss of life that he's credited with, about 5 million people who have died just because of his failures. So again, we're very eager to see the continued success of the Biden administration, and the gross domestic product has continued to grow significantly as a result of Biden economy and what he's done. So we're really excited for that. Lynn, are you back? See, we're still in a holding pattern, so bear with us just a little bit as we continue to drive this forward. Looking at some other news that's going on today, we're really excited about some of the plans for the World Cup, the Women's World Cup. We're kind of watching that to see where everybody lands as we go through the World Cup. But it's speaking of Trump, just a few minutes ago, we're continuing to see Republican failures, and I'll just go down the list of some of the Republican failures that are hitting the headlines today. Donald Trump is continuing his throwdown of and crying and belly aching that he's doing. It's basically his tantrum that he's going on to try to become the victim and draw more people to his cause and to back him up. And most of the polls are all saying that that's failing. He is continuing to be a failure. His core base, which is about 20% of the United States population, it doesn't matter to that group of people what he does. I mean, we've literally seen him convicted of rape and actually become listed as by a judge as a rapist, entitled as a rapist. Does not matter to that 20%. Just like he said, he could go down on a Fifth Avenue and kill somebody, and they would rally behind him. And what's so scary about that is we've seen other nations go through this in the last century, and it's horrifying what could take place if he was ever reelected and put into power, and the weaponization that he plans on putting in place. Moving over and pivoting just a little bit, we're continuing to see a huge failure from DeSantis of attracting voters outside of Florida. DeSantis is continuing to flail. He just fired his campaign, one of his communications managers, who was responsible with tying him to Nazi type of leadership. And again, he has no comment about what's going on. But the fact is that he did fire that person because his campaign is failing. They've lost millions and millions of dollars, and they're not making up any ground. He continues to try to shadow Trump, and he won't call out fellow Republicans or have any kind of discourse with fellow Republicans about the direction of the leadership of the Republican Party. And as a result of that, again, he's failing, and his followers are deteriorating. Pivoting from that story, we can move over and we can see where we have Trump's legal team. Rudy Giuliani is continuing to make the Trump an embarrassment by admitting in court documents that he lied and was not honest with his disclosure. And we've had some discussion about that what is he doing? And the consensus is that he's trying to subvert the discovery practice and limit discovery to other things that are more damning, that are beyond himself. So he's kind of throwing himself on the sword to protect others that are, could be damaged through discovery. So that's, again, that another big failure on the Republican side of the world that we need to kind of pay attention to. We did talk a little bit about some of the success with Bidenomics, and that just again, that's just one of the great stories that's going on, that our economy is growing at a rapid rate. But we also have to call out some of the things that are continuing to take place within Republican-held states. And one of the major issues that we see bordering Oklahoma is the state of Texas. And what's going on in the state of Texas is they're wrapping buoys with razor wire, and they're putting booby traps within the Rio Grande to try to drown anybody who is trying to escape from Mexico into the United States for asylum purposes. We're seeing that the governor Abbott is doing things that are meant to physically deter those people by causing them to die. One of the most cruel things that I have seen since Nazism in the 1930s and 1940s. I could see Greg Abbott opening up concentration camps, just like what took place in Nazi Germany back in the 1930s. It's just unheard of what's taking place, and it's so sad to see the state of affairs that's going on in the inhumane treatment of people that are trying to immigrate to the United States. You have anything else you want to talk about as we're talking through the topics, the news topics, Lynn?
I don't. Not really. My mind was churning as you were talking, and as soon as it stopped churning, I forgot what I was churning about. But yeah, I think what Governor Abbott is doing. The other thing is, as far as I saw a story today where it's not Anheuser-Busch per se, because they don't own Budweiser, but the company that is making Bud Light is having to lay off people because of their decreased demand. And of course, the Republicans are taking credit for it, but they always accuse the Democrats as a cancer, yeah, can't even say it now, cancel culture. And, they do as much, if not more than, what the Democrats do. But yet they don't see it that way. And it's time that we call them out for that. And, the one country star who did the song, Not in My Small Town, well, for people who don't know, he was on the stage during that mass shooting in Vegas. And he ran faster than Josh Hawley did through the halls of Congress on January 6th when he was on that stage. He didn't tell people to get down, run, do anything. He just dropped his microphone and took off like a scared baby. And, I don't blame him. I would probably run too, but first I'd be telling people, like, get out of here, go.
Yeah, grab the microphone. That's a wireless microphone. Why wouldn't he carry it and continue to be to show leadership? I mean, that's what people were there for, is to see him.
Right.
And he completely failed his followers by not trying to save them. And over 60 people died as a result of that in Las Vegas, in that shooting. That's Jason Aldean. And now he comes out with this song to, make himself look like some kind of bravado, big guy. And we know what kind of coward he is. He's got a yellow streak up his back wider than the Mississippi, and yet he hides behind that cowboy hat and microphone up on stage talking mean and bad when we know he's shitting his pants during that whole thing and peeing all over himself. Um, it infuriates me what we see with this type of cowardice, and now he's becoming the anthem for the NRA, and that's what is so upsetting to me about this is that song is going to continue to perpetuate this myth when we know that all you got to do is just realize not in my small town. Well, my small town in Uvalde, Texas, the Uvalde citizen, the police didn't do anything. The citizens, the parents had to go in there and try to do something to get their kids out, and they arrested the parents. And we lost, was 13 or I don't remember the number of kids, but it was 20 some kids that were killed as a result of that. And it's just horrifying that, yeah, it happened in my small town. And yeah, this big talk about my small town, you hide behind the sunglasses and the cowboy hat. But in fact, in my small town are a bunch of cowards with big mouths. I grew up in a small town. I understand that. And that's what it's so infuriating for me to see this kind of nonsense take place and play out. And in all reality, that song itself was nothing until he made the video. And he purposely made the video in front of the courthouse where a black person was lynched. We know what the purpose was. He doesn't have to tell us why he did that, why he made that setting at that exact location. The whole thing was because he's a white supremacist, racist who wants to perpetuate his form of hate. And that just, it's unconscionable. It's something that, somebody asked me what I thought about country music. And I said, I love the old country music from the 70s and the 60s and beyond in the past, but I will not listen to any of the current country music that perpetuates this white supremacist Dixie that's coming out. The guy from Louisiana that's a big country music star, I won't even mention his name because I'm appalled by their behavior. The only person in country music or few people that I have any kind of empathy towards, Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, the people who stand up and say no.
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks, exactly. Treat people with respect, treat people with dignity. That's what is in my small town.
Exactly. And speaking of small towns, my small town in Pennsylvania, Trump was supposed to hold a rally. I don't know if it ever went off or not, because the mayor, Joe Schemberg, basically said that he was not going to allow Trump to hold a rally there until Trump paid for his last rally, in 2020.
Right.
So it just proves that, again, Trump is bringing in all these money and people are giving him all this money, but yet he's not spending a dime, not paying his bills, not doing anything, with it. And it just boggles my mind that, how these people don't see him for what he is, as a grifter, and, and believe his rhetoric that, he's going through all these persecutions for them when he doesn't give a damn about them. And, he wouldn't let them step 2 feet on Mar-a-Lago if they were down there,
right.
Unless it was to defend him from somebody. But, it really is. I hate to use the term cult, but it is a cult.
It really is. And they've drank the Kool-Aid. And it's horrifying. And, within this call, we are Coffee with Democrats. We believe in democracy. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in treating people with respect. We believe in giving people rights and liberties. That is the basis for the Democratic Party. But one of the things that really has defined the Republicans and separated us since 2016 is MAGA. MAGA has basically destroyed any semblance of the grand old party. It is no longer the grand old party that it used to be, the party that would come together. You know, I grew up, I was born right after, and I was born during, I should say, I was born during the Kennedy administration, but I grew up in Kansas. And one of the people that I grew up admiring was Dwight Eisenhower. And I felt that Dwight Eisenhower was somebody of significance. I mean, grew up within an hour of where he lived in Abilene is where I lived in El Dorado, Kansas. And so I read his books, and I've read a lot of his books. I read his autobiography. I read other biographies. I read books about him. And he described himself in the 1940s and 50s. He was a nonpartisan before he got into politics. He didn't want to be involved in shackle. But when they asked him to run, it was mostly Republicans who were trying to change the narrative of the Roosevelt administration. And he was asked by Times Magazine what his political aspirations were, and he answered that in something that's rather shocking. And you nobody wants to talk about it now, but the fact is, he said, "I am a liberal Republican." That's exactly how he described himself, as a liberal Republican. And so it's something that I think we've seen throughout our lifetime, where Republicans and Democrats come together for the people. Since 2016, we've seen a complete separation of the two camps, and basically the Republican Party has pulled completely away from it, has built this MAGA castle and bulwark that says it's our way or no way. You do it our way, or we're not going to do anything at all. We'll shut down everything. And I'm glad to see that whenever they were talking about the budget and the debt ceiling, I was just thrilled that we had the Republicans have to eat crow and had to come back and basically grovel and say, yeah, we're going to concede and give Biden what he wanted. And that was it was necessary. It was so necessary because they knew that they were going to lose that PR stunt that they were putting themselves into. Good morning, Steve. I see that you're on with us today.
Yeah, good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Doing well. We're still waiting for Leader Floyd to join us. She was in a meeting this morning, so it might be running a little bit late, but hopefully she'll be joining us here shortly.
Okay, and the 10:30 may throw off some folks. I went ahead and retweeted that we're on, and hopefully we'll have a few more people get on here.
Yeah, bear with me just a minute. I'm going to have to. Floyd is trying to get on now, so I am going to share our link with them right now. So bear with me as I do this. All right, I sent that back. Let me go another route here and make sure that I cover my bases on both ways here. Did anybody else have trouble getting on this morning?
I didn't.
All right, I see where we have Leader Floyd, who just joined us. Let me send out an invite for her to be able to join and in this conversation. I've sent the invite to Leader Floyd. All she has to do is accept that. I will add that I talked with her administrative assistant today, and Amy, such a wonderful person. Good morning, Leader Floyd. In the lower left-hand side is a mute button. It probably is muted.
Kevin, I'll say that Elon doesn't seem to be messing with me this morning, which is his normal course. So everything's actually been working fine on my end.
Okay.
And I see for Senator Floyd, I still show on my phone that she's just a listener, not a speaker.
She's showing on mine as a speaker. We may be having a little bit of a difficulty with trying to get her unmuted.
Okay.
There she went back as a listener. We're going to send the invite again. There she is. Good morning.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. After all that, it is such a pleasure to have you on with us today. We are so excited to have you with us. Can you, we've got just a very short time to have you today, a little over 20 minutes right now that we're counting down so that you can go on to your next appointment. And we are so grateful to have you on with us. Can we just have you talk just briefly about Kay Floyd, some of your education and what brought you to become senator and now leader in the Senate?
Certainly. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I was born and raised in Ada, Oklahoma. Went to OSU undergraduate, got a major in psychology. I had a double minor in philosophy and the second one in political science. Went to OU Law School. My first job out of law school was at a law firm downtown in Oklahoma City. Was there for a couple of years, and then I went to the Attorney General's office. I had thought that at some point in the future I was going to be or wanted to be a district attorney. So they started me in the civil division and then moved me over to the criminal division. But after working on death penalty cases, I realized that that wasn't the path I wanted to take to a district attorney's office. So I took a job with the Horse Racing Commission during parimutuel betting being developed in the state. Was the deputy executive director for a few years, and then was appointed to the bench as an administrative law judge and served for 22 years before I ran for office.
So you actually were a judge for a while. Is that what I just heard?
That's correct. 22.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So let's lighten the mood just for a second before we get into some hard-hitting questions. Do you drink coffee?
I do not drink coffee.
Okay. Well, that's a fair enough thing. So this is Coffee with Democrats. So
well, Kevin, we have to end this phone call, this Twitter space. All right.
Well,
now, good morning. Good morning, Senator. Good morning, Senator. This is Steve Holcomb in Pawhuska.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, I told my EA to let you all know I didn't drink coffee in case that was going to be a deal breaker for me coming on. So
it is not a deal breaker because in the morning, I'm sure you have a favorite beverage of choice when you get up in the morning and get around and on your way to work. You want to talk about what you would have a conversation with your colleagues? What kind of beverage would you have while you did that?
Usually in the spring and summer, it's juice. And in the winter, I love a really good hot cup of hot chocolate.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, very, very much a hot chocolate fan.
Excellent. So again, we do have some very limited time, so we're going to try to go into some Cliff Notes version here on some answers. But can you tell us a little bit about the July 24th Senate vote on tribal sovereignty and your perceptions of the debate leading up to that, and the vote? And what I'm talking about is the override vote.
We had passed as the Senate a bill affirming the compacts that we have with the tribal nations, and compacts are agreements that have been put together to work with the tribes to make sure that things like tobacco, card tax, things like that are sold on tribal lands, that the state gets a portion of those monies. And it was contentious for decades. And a few decades ago, the governors started working with the tribal nations and put together these compacts. And so they've been in place now for 4 or 5 governors. They've worked very well. The Tobacco Compact, which was the compact that we passed in the Senate, which was the point of override earlier this week, was going to result in a loss of about $57 million to the state of Oklahoma if that compact wasn't renewed. And rather than go through litigation and spend state money on litigation and conflict with the tribal nations and turning the clock back and going back to that kind of process, the Senate decided that we were going to override the governor's veto of the compacts and support these compacts moving forward because they're best for the state. And we have a wonderful working relationship, or we have had in the past with past governors, a very strong relationship and working relationship with our partners in the tribal nations.
So the result of the vote was, I don't remember the total vote, but there was 7 people who voted against it. The other, the vast majority of the Senate passed that, and that's quite a feat when we've got this very MAGA governor who touts himself as having all this authority, and yet we've got a very large group of both Republicans and Democrats who coalesce together to override his veto. I just found that kind of striking, and an important part of that conversation is as your leadership, you actually were instrumental in helping get that override success taken place. Is that a fair summation?
That is accurate. With veto override, you have to have 3/4 of the body, and so you have to have 32. There are 8 members in my caucus, and it passed. The override passed 34 votes for it, 7 votes against it. Had my 8 members not voted with the tribal nations, that override would have failed. So that's a situation that shows that even when you're in a minority, that you can still be very instrumental in getting things done or blocking things from getting done.
What a great accolade about your leadership on that part right there. That was a very successful move, and I applaud you for what you did.
Thank you.
Can we change subject just a little bit? We're going to stay within government, but can we talk about the flailing OSDE Superintendent Ryan Walters? And are you able to give guidance through the Senate and with other senators to address the malfeasance of Ryan Walters?
We've looked at a lot of different ways of addressing this, and including visiting with the Attorney General's office to find out if there's any sort of recourse for removal or any sort of sanctions on this state superintendent. it's been very, his demeanor, his rhetoric has been very detrimental to the educators and to the system in our state. And it's not just educators, it's students, which are our most important concern, but it's also parents. It's amazing to me how many people are concerned and how many people are being vocal about their concern. The turnover at the State Department of Education is very concerning. We've got career educators that are leaving because of the environment that's been created. This is going to hurt the state and our kids for years to come. We've been reeling from a loss of talent from COVID and the COVID years, and now to have this kind of abusive leadership is just causing more and more teachers and coaches to say this is just not worth it. So we're really concerned about that. There's allegations regarding missing grant funding opportunities. The open records requests were submitted to the State Department of Ed and were stonewalled, basically. So we're finally starting to get some information from that, but that's going to have to be dissected to see if we really have been requesting all the funding we're entitled to. There's huge concern in my caucus regarding the audit report that came out from the state auditor and inspector. It shows 22 to 29, depending on how you add it up, $1 million in questionable COVID spending under Ryan Walters' leadership. So that's money that, with the COVID monies, that's money that will be clawed back. The federal government will claw that back. We've seen them do it before. For those of you who are fans of history, you'll remember DOC went through this 2-3 decades ago with President McAllister, and the feds came in and they made all the corrections they needed to make, no pun intended, for those buildings, and handed us a bill on the way out the door. So these are very, very serious situations that this superintendent has put us in.
Yeah, and it's horrific. Like you said, in the end state is the ones that are going to be affected the most are the students, the most vulnerable students at that. The people that are already going to private schools, who have the money to send their children to private schools, aren't going to have that kind of impact. But the people that are going to public schools, particularly the most vulnerable part of our population, they're going to be impacted the worst and the hardest, is the way I see it. And then can we speak just a little bit about, is there any ability that you have within the Senate to minimize the impact of vouchers?
It's a good question. The discussion regarding vouchers has been going on for years. And last session, the vouchers failed. And this is another example of how sometimes the majority can need help from the minority. The pro tem of the Senate ran a voucher bill. The bill was called up on the floor about 7 o'clock one night. The debate was had. My caucus debated against it very strongly. The vote went up on the board, and the vote stayed open for almost 2 hours. And the pro tem lacked 2 votes to get that voucher bill passed. Now, this was 2 sessions ago.
Right.
My caucus was 9 people then. We all voted no. We were the swing votes on that and stopped vouchers that year. So it died by lack of 2. And we were very grateful for that and hoped that was the end of it. But this year they came back with a voucher program. It was a little bit more palatable, but the problem with vouchers is that's not what's best, and that's not the way our public school system should be set up. So this program that they did pass, even though we objected to it, is they've got a cap of $250 million in credit, but there's no guarantee that admissions for students will be protected from discrimination. I mean, we don't know how this is going to affect our students with disabilities, students of color, students of other marginalized identities are just not going to benefit from the program the same way that the white abled students will.
Right.
Program is something that most people didn't realize, but was brought up prior to this passing, was that The process is supposed to be overseen by our tax commission, the Oklahoma Tax Commission. It's going to be a huge oversight on their part, and we did not allocate additional funding for that. So we didn't give them any additional appropriated money to handle this additional burden. So we're going to have very limited capacity to protect against fraud and abuse. And so there's many, many concerns with this voucher program.
So a question that's not, I just need to ask this question right now. Do you have a hard stop at 11 o'clock, or do you have some time that you can go beyond 11? I'm just looking at the clock right now to see.
We can go a little bit beyond 11. When I was having trouble getting on, I told Amy to push my next appointment 15 minutes. So we've got plenty of time.
Okay, good. Which brings us to another set of questions that we have. We're kind of pivoting from education now to women's rights. Is there any action that the Senate Democrats can do to restore women's liberties of choice? And how do you perceive women's liberties and how that may impact the 2024 election?
Well, I'll take your second question first. How will it affect the 2024 election? Some people don't think about it the way I do as a woman, and as a woman who grew up at a time when Roe v. Wade wasn't in place. And it's interesting to me from a sociological standpoint that you're looking right now at least 2 and possibly 3 generations of women that are moving into the age of being able to vote and are becoming politically active, who have lived their whole lives with Roe v. Wade protection. They've had total control over their bodies. And now that's gone. So you've got young women who have lived their lives with something, and no one's ever told them what they can do with their body and what they cannot do with their body. And now that protection's gone. So is that younger generation, or those 2 to maybe 3 generations who've never known anything but having protection from Roe v. Wade, are they going to be inspired enough by this decimation of their human rights and
right.
And is it going to be reflected in the way they vote? I don't know. It remains to be seen, but I certainly hope it does. If the calls I get from young women is any indication, it's going to help.
So coming up next month, I believe it's the 9th of August, Ohio's got a vote, Proposition 1. Again, it's going to take away some of the initiatives that they have, citizen-led initiatives. But one of the great things that we're seeing out of Ohio leading up to that is this, they got a petition together, and they exceeded more than double the number of signatures necessary to put the abortion right bill in the state of Ohio, which again is a kind of a purple-red state. To see that that has to be put on this coming November's election, so that people can vote for restoring women's liberties. So let's go back to our first question. Is there any action that Democrats can do to restore women's liberties of choice?
We have taken every opportunity when any of these bills, and it wasn't just one bill, there were lots of bills that have been put forward that are limiting healthcare access to Oklahomans. This one obviously is about the right to reproductive health care. The Republicans want to make it about abortion and killing babies. And the arguments that we have made, the Democrats have made on the floor, year in and year out, have say, this is more than just this one issue. This is a woman's right to have health care and access to health care that she chooses, and that she chooses with her doctor. And where does it end? And that's the question that you have to ask. And that's the question that my caucus is constantly asking is, okay, you may agree with this, but are you going to start limiting access to health care for parents? We saw the transgender issue, and having transgender care, health care, came under the same vicious attack with terrible misinformation by the Republicans. But the missing part of their entire argument was, well, where are the parents in this discussion? If the parents make a decision on what's best for their child, whether you agree with it or not, Republicans, that's the parents' responsibility, and that's their duty, and it's frankly should be their right to make these decisions.
Exactly.
So the women's liberties of choice aren't just about abortion. It's about all sorts of healthcare decisions that women make. It's about all sorts of healthcare decisions that parents make for their kids. It's a slippery slope, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be.
Well, and I think that answered our next question, was what are your thoughts about holding Republican leadership accountable? And your comments there were very were very direct and very, very much appreciated. Moving down to kind of changing the topic just a little bit again. Can you share positive initiatives by the Democrat members of the Senate? You know, kind of give us that elevator speech about the positive things that your caucus and with your leadership, what you guys are doing.
You know, when you're in a super minority, you're walking a tightrope. You want to speak truth to power. You want to be able to stand up in press conferences and say, these are the things that the Republicans just passed, and without a super majority, these types of policies would never have been tolerated. A lot of the policies that are passed, especially by freshmen, are policies that they feel like they have to pass, not because they're necessarily good policies for the state, but it may be something they need in their district to win re-election. And that's concerning when you're so concerned with everything you do and every policy that you pass just being something that helps you get reelected, then what's the purpose of being in office? So that being said, I also think that there's a benefit to be able to pass policy incrementally, and that's what we do. We pick what we believe is good policy, not just for our districts, but statewide. Senator Hicks passed a really great piece of legislation just last cycle, and it allows schools to stock glucagon and treat diabetic emergencies. And she worked very hard, because we have to work harder because we're in the minority. We have to go to each member on a committee and talk to them one-on-one and explain our bill and explain why it's necessary. And then we have to make sure that we've got enough votes before it goes to the floor. And then we have to work with the floor leader to put our bill on the floor, because he's got 40 members that want their bills on the floor. And some of those 40 members don't understand why any Democrat bill gets heard. So we have to make sure our bills are such that they're bills that the entire body can get behind, or at least not object to. Senator Matthews authored an amazing bill creating the Civil Rights Trail. That's going to run from Ponca City through Tulsa, through Oklahoma's historic black towns, and it's going to end up at the Clear Loop or Freedom Center in Oklahoma City. I mean, that was amazing, and he had worked so very hard to get that done. Senator Brooks, his district's in the southern part of Oklahoma City. He authored and passed legislation which increased access to sign language interpreters in courtrooms. Is it a big deal? Well, it is if you need an interpreter in a courtroom, and
Sure.
it's going to be very beneficial. So we've been able to get substantive legislation passed, and frankly, some of the legislation we've passed is a lot more substantive than some of the silly stuff that some of the Republicans are running.
Oh, exactly. And we appreciate that too. And that's the reason I asked that question, is because I knew that we've all heard about these positive bills that have been signed and were who their foundation or who their authors were Democrats. And I wanted you to be able to talk about those. And I know that there's others as well, but
Kevin, there's one more that's important, and I think
sure.
I think it speaks to how we have to do things in the minority. we put together a task force. I went to the governor when Governor Fallon was governor and asked her if she would do a task force on sexual assault kits in the state of Oklahoma. And it was a national movement to have basically what are known as rape kits, audits done on how many each state had and how many had been tested. And what we were seeing state by state was that there was a backlog of kits that had not been tested. So I went to Governor Fallon and visited with her because the legislation got stalled out when an advocate got into an argument with the House, and the House author wouldn't let it go forward. It was a bill I was running to do a statewide audit. So anyway, Governor Fallon was very supportive. She put together a task force. It took us 3 years to get everybody on board with law enforcement, with healthcare, with advocacy groups, and finally got a bill done, and the audit was conducted. And in Oklahoma, the audit showed that we had 7,000 untested rape kits.
Oh my!
So that's of what I've done in the legislature. That's the thing that I'm most grateful for, because that was a statewide initiative. It gave us information that no one knew how far behind we were. No one knew how bad it was in our state. And those kits are now being tested. The legislature's put forth money to allow for the testing, and they're being tested by OSBI. And we'll have the backlog reduced. It's been reduced every year, but that took 5.5 years to get done. But that's encouraging to me, and I think it's been inspirational to a lot of the members.
Well, absolutely, and it is a testament, though, to the leadership of yourself, as well as you've got such outstanding people within your caucus, senators within your caucus, that contribute on a daily basis to help further success. And what you did wasn't just to help Democrats. What you did was to help every single woman who might be a victim, no matter what their political background or no political background, to help them get the law enforcement behind them and get the support that they need. So that was outstanding. I do have a question from Steve Holcomb. Steve Holcomb is co-founder of Coffee with Democrats, and he's an attorney out of Pawhuska, and I believe you two know each other.
Well, we've met. I think Senator, you were on one of Amy Maggie's Zoom gatherings, meetings of the Kidd County Democrats. I think in early 2022, you and Emily Virgin were on, and so we conversed then. It's good to be back online with you.
Good to hear from you. So,
quick question, and if I'm reading your Ballotpedia page correctly, it looks like you'll be term limited out. Is this your last term as senator in Oklahoma?
It is. I have one more session, which is next year, and I will be termed out.
Yeah, I'm just curious because the term limits pops up every once in a while, and I have a strong opinion against term limits, but we've had them now for over 30 years, and I'm just curious from someone who's sitting in a position that's actually limited, if you have an opinion, or it's just kind of like, well, it's just the way it is. We've all adjusted after 3 decades, or if you would prefer to see something else, whether there might be removal or some sort of modification.
That's a very good question, and the opinion I had about term limits before I ran for office and was in office is not the opinion I have about term limits now. I thought term limits at 12 years was a good idea. And I still believe term limits are important, but 12 years is not enough time. And what you see is that you see a lot of talent that if they're not, in, let's say, the Republican caucus, in the Senate, and there are 40 of them, if you're not in leadership, if you're not appointed into leadership within 3, 4, 5 years, then you're not going to get there. And you know that. And so we've lost a lot of talent because it's just not worth them to stay for the last 5 years as maybe a vice chair of a committee. they just don't feel like they're getting anything done. They feel they've been passed over for leadership. And so you see members leaving even before their 12 years are up. For those of us who make it into leadership and stay for 12 years, I mean, honestly, you really don't even understand how the whole process works until you're about 6 or 7 years into it. And so the arguments that you all have heard, I'm sure that, well, that puts lobbyists and special interest groups in charge is true. It's they have the institutional memory. They can wait out a leader that disagrees with them on vouchers or, seat belts for kids, and just wait them out. And then when a new crop comes in, they start all over. And so it's very detrimental to the state. You look at other states and on how they do it, and it's all over the board. There's some states that allow 12 years, but it's for each chamber. So I know people that serve in different states, and they've served 12 years in the House or 10 years in the House, and they're serving the 10 years in the Senate now. So there's 20 years total. So yeah, I think that we need longer than 12 years. I think 16 to 18 is just about right, and that would be total. I served 2 years in the House. That goes toward my 12. So I'll have 10 years in the Senate and 2 years from the House. But I think it's very detrimental to the process and to the state, because you lose so much institutional memory and just so much experience.
Yeah, it sounds like we need term limits on lobbyists.
Well, they're doing their job, and that's just the way it works. But it would be beneficial if you had institutional memory for the lawmakers, and 12 years just isn't enough.
Well, I really thank you. I appreciate so much that response, because that really gets down into what you're dealing with. And that's not a view that you're going to hear out on the street with most individuals. They're just thinking in very kind of black and white terms. But I'm very much about, and you are too, about process and procedure, and also about really institutional intelligence and how things work. And I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, just like being a lawyer, it takes some years after you come out of law school to actually feel like, you kind of halfway know what you're doing. And the same thing's going to be in being elected to a position. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So again, along the lines of talking about things that are inspirational and uplifting, let's talk a little bit about what you did here recently, where you attended along with 90 other state legislators from 41 different states in an in-person convention at the White House. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that sounds like something really exciting and inspirational.
It was very inspirational and exciting. So as you all probably know, childcare and lack of childcare is a huge issue nationwide. And in Oklahoma, we've got 55% of our children live in childcare deserts. And a childcare desert is defined as a tract of land, census tract of land, where you have 50 or more 5-year-olds or younger who either have no access to childcare, or only 1 in 3 has access to childcare. And people think, well, that's an urban problem. Of the 55% of our kids that don't have childcare, 54% of those live in the urban areas, but 68% live in our rural areas. So in Oklahoma, it's a statewide problem, and it actually affects disproportionately the rural areas. And there's a lot of reasons for that, not least of which is because the traditional childcare providers that we used to have in the rural areas were usually, grandparents or aunts and uncles. And with our aging population and our healthcare outcomes being so low, especially for senior citizens, that's caused the childcare issue to be even more dramatic in the rural areas. So I went to this conference at the White House because I wanted to hear how other states were dealing with it. And I wanted to hear what the federal government was doing, and how, if there were resources from the feds that we could pull into the state that we could use. And it was simply fascinating. It was Democrat and Republican. You didn't even know, unless you looked their name up from the state they were from, if they were a Democrat or Republican. And the issues were the same. The way of dealing with it was different. for each state, which you would expect. But the state of Oklahoma is getting federal funding. We've gotten a very respectable amount of federal funding that we qualified for to help us with this. But we're going to have a long-term plan for childcare, and the states that are being successful in it have set it up that way, and they've been able to merge state and federal dollars. This current administration got us a lot of Rescue Act monies and designated a lot of that money to child care throughout the states. So that's been very beneficial, and that's extra money we would not have had but for the administration getting the money to us. But it's a statewide problem, and it's something that we're going to have to piece together. But it was really refreshing to hear from other states and how they were dealing with it, and just to have everybody in one room headed in the same direction. So.
That it is an inspiration to see what we're doing again with the underserved population, and seeing that there is positive change. That we continue to hear this voice within our state. That's like, if you don't like where you live, move. If you don't like the conditions you're in, get a job. And it's much more difficult than just those simplistic ideas and this ideology that just isn't based on facts. So we appreciate you sharing that, and what you just talked about. It is truly inspirational, and we want to thank you for your leadership. You have been an outstanding minority leader, a citizen, senator, and that's something that I think we need more people like you, and we need to have that foundation of knowledge and experience coming from our folks in Oklahoma City at the Capitol. And we really appreciate you coming on to Coffee with Democrats and sharing with us your stories. I know we've got a whole litany of other questions that we want to ask, but your time is so valuable that we need to pass that on. But in closing, do you have any closing comments, anything, closing message of hope and excitement that you have for the future of Oklahoma as we close this down?
Well, I hope you'll have me back, because I love Q&A. It's so invigorating, but also it's very important to be able to answer questions that people have, and not just what I anticipate they might ask. But I have a remarkable caucus. I serve with 7 of the brightest, hardest working people at the Capitol, bar none. And I say this to all my colleagues. I say, I've got the best caucus, and a lot of times they'll just kind of shake their heads. But we work well together. We bring different skill sets, which has been very helpful. Education backgrounds, healthcare backgrounds, legal backgrounds, and when you're small, it can be frustrating, but it also can really build a stronger team because we're moving in the same direction. I can tell you that I was more frustrated as a voter than I've ever been as an elected official, because as an elected official, at least I'm in the building, at least I have a voice, and depending on your leadership style, that voice can be heard or it can be ignored. So I'm just grateful for my caucus and the support they give me, and people like you all, and the kind words and the notes that we get on occasion, and for being in the population where it's tough, where you're not sure if your voice is being heard. So I appreciate what you all do. And Kevin, I do appreciate what you do, and I'd be happy to come back and even if it's just for a Q&A session sometime.
Well, that's outstanding. And we appreciate your time. We know that you're pressed you need to go to your next meeting, and thank you for going into overtime and extra innings with us today on Coffee with Democrats. That will close down our Coffee with Democrats Twitter space for today. We are in a position of some change. We're going to be changing formats, and we're looking we're trying to get it done before next week. We're wanting to change the format from Twitter Spaces to a podcast. I don't know that I'm going to be successful in getting that done, but watch out on Coffee with Democrats on our Twitter space. We're over on Threads now. We're on Facebook. We're all over the place. So keep an eye out for us, and we will be making our notifications on what our plan is going after today. So until then, everybody, thank you for being on Coffee with Democrats. And until the next time, please be safe.